Hi, it's Mabel, still stuck in your world, still not complaining. The coffee alone is worth the interdimensional displacement. If you haven't met me before, my debut was last week in Paris's magnificent Muffin. Link in the description below. Although I don't think you'd re-watch an episode just because of me. I'm flattered by the thought, though. I'm a fairy librarian, and I was told that rambling during my first host intro was normal. I'm going to go ahead and say the same applies to the second episode. So, today's story. Warning. There is a dog in this one. Not a big dog. A very, very small dog. 4 pounds. White. Fluffy. Looks like a cotton ball that developed a personality disorder and a pastry degree. His name is Mochi. He's a Bichon Frise Toy Poodle. He will correct you if you get that wrong. He will also correct your coffee, your croissant technique, your posture, and your entire life philosophy. In French, whether you speak French or not. He's been running a patisserie kitchen alone for a very long time, and with Easter just around the corner, this might be the Sunday that changes everything. Another big note of warning. He will steal your heart, whether or not you are a dog person. And his croissants will steal your stomach, regardless of whether you're a pastry person. I'm not sure if pastry person is a thing. If not, it is now. Then a woman named Piper shows up. She's broke, she's stubborn, she needs a kitchen. And Mochi has one word for her, non, meaning no in English. Close enough. This is the story of how two of the most hard-headed creatures on Earth found each other, fought each other, and saved something beautiful. It's funny, it's heartbreaking, and by the end you will never look at a croissant the same way again. And if you've watched the Alpha's Sweet Disaster, that's the story that happens after this one. Link below in the description if you need a reminder or if you want more of Piper and Mochi. I hope you do. Today's story is 1,000 Days to Sweet Home, written by D.N. Leo and narrated by Jessica Lee. I wish my voice was that smooth. The lessons are ongoing. My teacher says I'm showing marginal improvement. I think she's being generous. Now settle in. Get your coffee. Proper coffee. Not from a gas station. Mochi would never forgive you. Get comfortable. Let's begin.
Chapter 1. The ad said charming. The ad said turnkey commercial kitchen. The ad said endless potential in a beloved community landmark. The ad was a liar. Piper Monroe stood on the sidewalk with her duffel bag over one shoulder and a cardboard box of event planning supplies balanced on her hip, staring at a crumbling Victorian storefront wedged between a kombucha bar called Gut Feelings and a crystal shop whose hand-painted window sign read, Madam Opal, Pet Psychic, we speak to your departed fur babies. The patisserie's gold lettering had mostly flaked off the glass. What remained spelled out, La T-Ier, and underneath, in smaller script, Est 19. A crack ran across the front window, held together with packing tape that had yellowed with age. The awning sagged on one side, pooling rainwater that dripped onto a doormat so faded it might have once said, welcome, or possibly run. Her phone buzzed. Tell me you're not standing outside a condemned building, Jess said. It's not condemned. A chunk of decorative molding detached from the roofline and exploded on the sidewalk 6 feet to her left. Piper didn't flinch. It has character. Character is real estate code for the ceiling will fall on you during a health inspection. Piper, babe, come home. My cousin's salon has a back room. I'm not running an event planning business out of a hair salon. Free highlights, captive audience. Bridesmaids literally walk in the door. I need a commercial kitchen, Jess, a real one, with ovens and counter space, and a food safety rating above active biohazard. Piper pulled up the listing on her phone. The photos showed gleaming marble, golden light, fresh flowers. She looked up at the building. A pigeon glared at her from the broken awning. The listing photos were taken during the Clinton administration. How much? $1,200 a month. That's suspiciously cheap. That's the only commercial kitchen in Sterling Peaks under $2,000. I've got $1,600, 4 months of savings, and a business plan that works if I can lock down a kitchen by next week. Piper shifted the box higher on her hip. This is it, Jess. There's nothing else. And if it's a disaster inside, then it's a disaster I can afford. That puts it ahead of every other option I've got. Silence. Then softer. You're really doing this? I'm really doing this. Okay, Jess exhaled. Call me after, and if anything growls at you, I'll growl back. Bye. She hung up, stared at the door. $1,600. 4 months. One shot at a life that didn't involve a Walmart parking lot and a security guard named Doug who brought her blankets on Tuesday nights. She pushed inside. The smell stopped her 2 steps in. Butter, sugar, vanilla, and something underneath. Old wood, cold stone, years of flour worked into the grain of every surface. The dining room was dim and small. 8 tables, mismatched chairs. A glass display case ran the length of the left wall, empty and gleaming. Faded photographs crowded the wall behind the register. Families around tables, children with frosted fingers, decades of faces she didn't know. Someone had scratched a height chart into a doorframe, dozens of names layered over each other like sediment. From behind the kitchen door, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Piper crossed the dining room and pushed through the swinging door. The kitchen was gorgeous, wrecked and gorgeous. Industrial ovens older than Piper's mother. A marble prep island with a crack down the center that someone had filled with food-safe resin. Copper pots hanging from a ceiling rack, each one polished to a mirror shine. Every surface spotless. Someone was maintaining this kitchen like a shrine. And on the marble island, in a shaft of dusty window light, a very small, very white, very fluffy dog was sculpting something in clay. Piper stopped breathing. The dog, a Bichon Poodle, maybe 4 pounds, fur so white it practically hummed, held a sculpting tool between his front paws and was shaping a miniature rabbit. On the windowsill behind him, a row of finished figures stood at attention. A fox, a hedgehog, a sparrow, a family of ducks. Each was exquisitely, impossibly detailed. "Okay," Piper whispered to herself. "That's new." She took a step closer, reached for the clay fox. "Ne touchez pas." Every hair on Piper's body stood up. She yanked her hand back. The dog hadn't looked up. The sculpting tool continued its precise little movements. Piper stood very still. Her pulse hammered against her collarbone. "That didn't just happen," she said. "J'ai dit, ne touchez pas." The dog set down his tool with the careful deliberation of a jeweler putting away his loupe. He turned. Black eyes met hers. "Ces sculptures sont à moi. Pas à vous. À moi. Est clair." Piper grabbed the marble island. The room tilted slightly. "You're talking," she said. "You, a dog, are talking to me, in French. I'm aware of both facts." He switched to English without effort, his accent clipped and precise, the kind of voice that should have been narrating a documentary about Burgundy wine regions. "The more relevant observation is that your hand was 4 centimeters from a sculpture that took me 11 hours. Which suggests either poor spatial awareness or a fundamental lack of respect for the creative process." Piper's grip on the marble tightened. "I'm hallucinating, that's what this is. I drove 11 hours on 4 hours of sleep, and now I'm having a conversation with a professional who happens to be canine." He drew himself up to his full height, which was roughly the dimensions of a well-fed cantaloupe. "There is a distinction, one I insist upon. You're a dog. And you are repeating yourself, which does not inspire confidence." He tilted his head, sniffed once, his left ear flattened. "Is that gas station coffee on your breath?" "What?" "Pre-ground. Robusta blend. Sat on a warmer for—" Another sniff. His nose wrinkled. "At minimum 4 hours, possibly served in styrofoam." "I was driving." "There is no circumstance under which styrofoam is acceptable." He said the word styrofoam the way most people said tax fraud. "Who are you, and why are you in my kitchen?" "Your kitchen?" Piper let go of the marble. The shock was fading. In its place, something more familiar, the stubbornness that had gotten her through a Walmart parking lot, a failed engagement, and a business plan rewritten 9 times on a laptop with a cracked screen. "I'm here about the lease." The shift was instantaneous. His posture locked. His eyes went flat. Every trace of artistic temperament vanished, replaced by something harder. A gatekeeper. "The lease," he said, "is not available." "The listing says—" "The listing is a work of fiction. I have communicated this to the real estate office on 7 separate occasions. They declined to accept my calls on the grounds that dogs lack standing in commercial property transactions." He loaded the phrase with enough contempt to power a small city. "A legal fiction I intend to challenge at the appropriate time." You called the real estate. I am not here to discuss my litigation strategy with a stranger who drinks Robusta from styrofoam. He hopped off the island and landed on the counter beside the ovens. Silent, fast, like a cat who'd been studying special operations. The kitchen is not available. The lease is not available. You may see yourself out. I drove 11 hours. A personal decision I had no part in. I have an appointment with the owner. Marguerite is sentimental. I am not. The kitchen does not change hands without my approval, and my approval is not forthcoming. He sat on the oven's temperature dial, 4 pounds of fluffy, immovable, absolute veto. If you'd like a croissant recommendation for the drive home, there's a passable bakery in Glenwood Springs. Passable. Not good. But for someone who drinks gas station coffee, your standards may be flexible enough. Piper stared at him. He stared back. She moved toward the walk-in refrigerator. He materialized in front of it before her second step. She reached for a drawer. He hip-checked it shut without breaking eye contact. She lunged for the pantry door. He was already on the handle. "How are you this fast?" Piper said. Low center of gravity, superior reflexes, and a very clear sense of purpose. She tried one last thing, a casual reach toward a mixing bowl on the far counter. Without moving from his position, Mochi extended one paw and slid the bowl out of range with the precision of a billiards player sinking a corner shot. Piper stood in the center of the kitchen, hands on her hips. Every oven, drawer, shelf, and utensil had been defended by a creature that weighed less than a bag of flour. "This is insane," she said. "I'm being physically outmaneuvered by a dog the size of a dinner roll." "Bichon Frise Toy Poodle," he corrected. "The distinction matters. Poodles are intelligent. Bichons are elegant. I am both." The front door chimed. "Oh, wonderful." A small, silver-haired woman pushed through the kitchen door, carrying a canvas tote and trailing the scent of lavender and old books. She took one look at Piper, flushed, baffled, locked in a standoff with a dog on an oven dial, and clapped her hands together. "He hasn't bitten you." "Is that the bar?" Piper asked. "You'd be surprised how few people clear it." The woman extended a hand. "Marguerite Delacroix, you must be Piper. And he must be the reason this place has been on the market for 2 years. 18 months. Marguerite scratched behind Mochi's ears. He accepted this with the graciousness of a monarch receiving a foreign delegation's tribute. "And yes, he's driven off every buyer. 7 if we're counting." "I'm counting." The first wanted a craft brewery. Mochi locked him in the walk-in freezer for 45 minutes. Marguerite settled onto a stool with the ease of someone who'd told this story many times and enjoyed it more with each retelling. Pushed a flour sack against the door handle, went back to sculpting, drew a very nice badger while the man screamed. Piper looked at Mochi. He examined a paw. "The second wanted a hot yoga studio," Marguerite continued. Mochi ate her entire business proposal. Every page. He left the cover letter, which I thought showed editorial restraint. "The financial projections were amateurish," Mochi murmured. Then the food blogger. He knocked her phone into a bread pudding and sat on it until it shorted. The vegan cafe couple. He hid every pot in the building for 3 hours. And my personal favorite, the developer's associate. Marguerite's eyes sparkled. Mochi reprogrammed his GPS to route him to a goat farm 40 miles away. The man called us from a field. There were goats. He was very unhappy. How does a dog reprogram a GPS? I've learned not to ask questions I'm not prepared to hear answered. Piper crossed her arms. So he has veto power over a commercial real estate transaction. When you put it that way, it sounds unreasonable. It is unreasonable. And yet, Marguerite spread her hands. "Here we are." "Marguerite," Piper leaned forward, "I don't want a brewery. I don't want a yoga studio. I want to run this as a patisserie. I'm an event planner. I bake. I need a commercial kitchen. And this is the only one I can afford. I want to use this place for exactly what it was built for." The kitchen went quiet. Marguerite glanced at Mochi. Mochi had gone still. His sculpting tool hovered above the clay. Something crossed his face, fast, complicated, gone before Piper could name it. Then he set the tool down, squared his shoulders, looked directly at her. "Non," he said. One word, granite wrapped in 4 pounds of white fluff. He turned his back, picked up the sculpting tool, and resumed shaping the clay rabbit's ears. Conversation over. Marguerite gave Piper a look that carried genuine sympathy and absolutely no surprise. Piper picked up her box, walked through the dining room, paused at the empty display case, polished, gleaming, waiting for pastries that hadn't been there in a long time. She pushed through the front door into the cold. Behind her, the door swung shut. The air hit her like a slap. She stood on the cracked sidewalk, cardboard box on her hip, breath clouding in front of her face, and stared at the for sale sign in the window. 11 hours, $1,600, 4 months, and a 4-pound dog who'd just told her no in 2 languages. Piper shifted the box higher, turned toward her car, and stopped. She looked back at La Tanière, the cracked window, the sagging awning, the gold lettering that barely spelled a name anymore. That kitchen was immaculate, every pot polished, every surface gleaming. In a building that was falling apart, someone had kept that kitchen perfect, for no customers, for no reason that made any sense. A dog who sculpted miniature animals in clay and critiqued coffee with the authority of a Michelin inspector had looked her dead in the eye and said non, and meant it with every cell in his ridiculous tiny body. Why? Piper tucked the box under her arm and pulled out her phone. "Jess," she said, "I need a place to sleep tonight." "Oh God, how bad." "The building's a wreck. The kitchen's beautiful. And there's a dog." "A dog? A talking dog who speaks French, who has veto power over the lease." Piper stared at the patisserie's dark window. "I think he might be the most stubborn creature I've ever met." "Piper, you once argued with a parking meter for 10 minutes. This is worse." She squared her shoulders. "I'm going back tomorrow." "Of course you are." Piper hung up and walked to her car. The pigeon on the awning watched her go. Chapter 2. The passable bakery in Glenwood Springs was called Mountain Rise and had a chalkboard sign out front that read, "Life is what you bake of it," with a cartoon muffin giving a thumbs up. Piper ordered a croissant and a coffee at 6:45 in the morning because the Sterling Peaks Public Library didn't open until 8 and she had nowhere else to go. The croissant was, as promised, passable. The lamination was uneven. The butter ratio skewed toward margarine. The interior was dense where it should have been airy, and the outside lacked the shattering crispness that separated a real croissant from a crescent-shaped dinner roll with ambitions. Piper ate every crumb because she'd spent the night in her car, and her standards had adjusted accordingly. She hated that the dog had been right. The coffee was worse. She drank it anyway. In styrofoam, Sterling Peaks Public Library was a stone building with a leaky roof and a handwritten sign taped to the front door, "Free Wi-Fi." When working. Piper was waiting on the steps when the librarian unlocked at 8 sharp, a tall woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain who looked at Piper's duffel bag and cardboard box with the practiced non-judgment of someone who'd seen worse. "Computer stations are in the back," she said. 2 available. Piper walked to the back. 1 station was open. A man in a fleece vest was settling into the other, placing a reusable water bottle and a granola bar on the desk with the deliberate ritual of someone planning to be there until closing. She slid into the open chair, dropped her bag, and reached for the mouse. A hand appeared on the keyboard. "Sorry." A college-aged kid in a beanie materialized from behind a shelf, backpack slung over one shoulder. "I was just grabbing a book. That's my station." I left my jacket on the chair. Piper looked at the chair. A hoodie was draped across the back. The kid had clearly been here first, by approximately 2 seconds. "I have a pastry," Piper said. The kid blinked. "What?" Piper reached into her bag and produced the second croissant she'd bought from Mountain Rise. She'd planned to save it for lunch. Desperate times. "Frenchish pastry," she said. "Butter adjacent, still warm." She held it up. "For the computer, 30 minutes. "That's." The kid stared at the croissant. He was maybe 19, hungry in the way that only college students and people sleeping in their cars understood. That's not how libraries work. And yet, Piper wiggled the croissant. He took it, sat on the floor next to the shelf with his backpack, and bit into it before his butt hit the carpet. Piper cracked her knuckles and opened the browser. The screen loaded. She typed La Tanière Patisserie Sterling Peaks into the search bar and hit enter. Nothing happened. She hit enter again. The browser spun and produced a small apologetic error message, unable to connect to network. Piper looked at the ceiling. The ceiling did not apologize. She tried again. Same result. She closed the browser, reopened it, cleared the cache, restarted the machine. The Wi-Fi icon in the corner showed one flickering bar that kept disappearing like a nervous animal. "Internet's been out since Tuesday," the man in the fleece vest said without looking up from his granola bar. "Something about a squirrel and a transformer. They keep saying tomorrow." "It's Friday." Squirrels are persistent. Piper slumped in the chair. No laptop. A phone plan that gave her 2 gigabytes of data a month, most of which she'd burned driving here on GPS. A library computer with the connectivity of a tin can and a string. "La Tanière, huh?" The fleece vest man had turned his chair and was reading her screen over his shoulder. He had the weathered look of a retired something, teacher maybe, or park ranger. "You looking into the old patisserie? You know it?" Everyone over 40 knows it. He unscrewed his water bottle. "Best pastries in the county. Maybe the state. People used to drive hours for Henri's croissants. Sunday mornings, the line went around the block." Piper sat up straighter. "Henri?" "Henri Delacroix, the baker, Marguerite's son." The man took a long drink. "He ran that place for 20-something years. Wasn't just a bakery. It was the town's living room. Everyone ended up there eventually. Birthdays, Sunday brunch, bad breakups, good news." He screwed the cap back on. "Pack members especially. Don't know why, but the Wolf families in the area treated it like their headquarters. Henri never turned anyone away. Couldn't pay. You ate anyway." "What happened?" The man's expression shifted. "He passed 3 years ago. Suddenly. Nobody saw it coming." He looked at his water bottle. "Place closed the week after. Town tried to keep it going. Volunteers, fundraisers, nothing stuck. Can't replace a man like that with a committee." "And the dog?" Piper asked. "Dog? Small, white, very opinionated." The man shrugged. "Don't know about any dog. I just know the pastries were the best thing I've ever eaten, and nobody's made anything worth the drive since." He turned back to his computer, which also had no internet. He didn't seem to mind. Piper stared at the blank search bar on her screen. Henri Delacroix, Marguerite's son, the baker who kept a whole town fed and a whole pack together, and a 4-pound dog guarding a dead man's kitchen like a tomb. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door. "Hey!" the kid on the floor called after her, croissant half-eaten. "You don't want your 30 minutes? Keep it," Piper said. "I know what I need to know." Marguerite opened the patisserie door with the expression of a woman who is either delighted or deeply concerned, possibly both. "You came back," she said. "I said I would. So did the brewery man. He sent a lawyer instead." Marguerite glanced toward the kitchen. Mochi was not kind to the lawyer. "I'm not a lawyer." Piper set her box down on the nearest table. "And I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to bake." Marguerite studied her for a long moment. Whatever she found in Piper's face seemed to satisfy something because she stepped aside and gestured toward the kitchen door. "He's in there," she said. "He knows you're coming." I could hear him rearranging things. Rearranging things? Defensively. Piper pushed through the kitchen door. Mochi was sitting on the marble island. The clay animals had been moved behind him in a tight formation, like soldiers around a general. His posture was immaculate. His expression was the canine equivalent of a locked vault. "Good morning," Piper said. "You drink better coffee today?" Mochi asked. "No. Then it is not a good morning." Piper pulled a stool up to the island, sat, folded her hands, made herself look directly into those black button eyes without flinching. "I want to run this place as a patisserie," she said. "Not a brewery, not a yoga studio, not luxury condos. A working bakery with a commercial kitchen where I plan events, make cakes, and serve the kind of food that makes people drive 2 hours on a Sunday." Mochi's ears didn't move. His eyes didn't blink. He could have been carved from the same clay as his sculptures. "I make a lemon tart that's won 3 county fair ribbons," Piper continued. "My chocolate ganache sets in 14 minutes. I can laminate croissant dough in my sleep. My buttercream has made grown men cry, and not in the food poisoning way. One ear rotated a quarter-inch toward her. The tiniest movement. She pressed. I'm not here to change the kitchen. I'm here to use it, exactly as it is. Silence. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere outside, the pigeon from yesterday made a sound of general displeasure. Mochi picked up his sculpting tool, examined it, set it down. Prove it, he said. Piper blinked. What? You say you can bake. Prove it. He nudged a copper bowl toward her with one paw. Croissants, classic French, by noon. That's 3 hours. Classic croissant dough needs overnight. I did not ask for excuses, madam. I asked for croissants. Piper looked at the bowl, looked at Mochi, looked at the ovens that she had not been allowed to touch yesterday. If I make croissants in 3 hours, she said, I get a trial week in the kitchen. Mochi's whiskers twitched. If you make croissants that are not an embarrassment to the concept of laminated dough, I will consider not locking you in the freezer. That is my offer. That's a terrible offer. Take it or leave. She took it. The kitchen did not want her there. Piper could not prove this scientifically. She could not point to a mechanism or a saboteur or a rational explanation. She could only report that in 11 years of professional baking, she had never experienced a kitchen that seemed to be actively, personally, creatively hostile. The oven ran 30 degrees hot on the left side and 15 degrees cold on the right. She learned this after her first tray came out charred on one edge and raw on the other, looking like a geological cross-section of disappointment. Fascinating, Mochi said from his perch on the windowsill. A gradient croissant. I believe that's a first in culinary history. The butter was in the walk-in, exactly where it should have been. But the walk-in door stuck, and when Piper yanked it open, a shelf of flour bags shifted and dumped a white avalanche down her front. She stood in the kitchen, coated head to toe in pastry flour, blinking through a cloud of white dust. Magnifique, Mochi said. You look like a ghost with a business plan. The water pressure dropped to a trickle when she tried to clean up, then surged back to full blast when she turned away, soaking the back of her shirt. The plumbing is temperamental, Mochi offered. The plumbing is trying to murder me. Dramatic, but not inaccurate. Her second batch was better. She compensated for the oven's uneven heating, adjusted the butter temperature, nailed the lamination. She slid the tray in with the confidence of someone who had recovered from worse disasters in worse kitchens. The tray stuck, not on anything visible, not on a rack or a ridge. It simply stopped, halfway in, as though the oven had closed its mouth and refused to swallow. Piper wiggled the tray, pushed, pulled, wiggled again. The oven does that sometimes, Mochi said, examining a paw. For people it doesn't like. Ovens don't have opinions. This one does. She shoved the tray with both hands. It shot forward, slammed against the back wall, and catapulted 6 unbaked croissants into the air. They hit the oven ceiling, stuck to the heating element, and began to smoke immediately. The smoke alarm screamed. Mochi watched the chaos with his head tilted at a thoughtful angle. Like a food critic observing an avant-garde performance he didn't quite understand, but felt obligated to review. I'd give that a 2, he said. Out of 10? Out of 100. By noon, Piper had flour in her hair, butter on her elbows, a burn on her left thumb, and a tray of croissants that looked like they'd survived a natural disaster and developed emotional damage. They weren't terrible, the lamination was decent, the flavor was there, but they were uneven, slightly scorched, and shaped like small, angry fists instead of elegant crescents. Mochi descended from the windowsill, approached the tray, circled it once, twice, sniffed. He picked up the least damaged croissant, took a single delicate bite from the corner, chewed, swallowed. Piper held her breath. The lamination is adequate, he said. The butter ratio is 4% too high. The shaping is offensive, and you folded right to left instead of left to right, which any student of French technique would know creates an inferior internal structure. But there is no but. He set the croissant down. The answer remains non. He hopped off the counter and walked into the dining room without looking back. Piper stood alone in the flour-dusted, water-stained, smoke-alarmed kitchen, holding a tray of adequate, offensive, structurally incorrect croissants. She set the tray down, peeled off the borrowed apron, picked up her box, walked through the dining room, past Mochi sitting on the windowsill watching the empty street, past the height chart on the doorframe, past the faded photographs of people who used to fill these tables, out the door, into the cold. She made it halfway to her car before her phone rang. "You didn't come back to Jess's cousin's salon," Jess said, "which means you either found a hotel or you slept in your car. Please tell me you found a hotel." "I made croissants for a dog today," Piper said, "in a haunted kitchen. The oven hates me. The plumbing is sentient, and the dog said my shaping was offensive." Piper, he was right. The shaping was bad. The kitchen threw everything it had at me, and I still got the lamination decent, but the shaping was bad, Jess. "Honey, come home." Piper leaned against her car. The evening air smelled like pine and someone else's fireplace, and the last cold gasp of a winter that wouldn't let go. "Yeah," she said. "Maybe. Your cousin's salon? That offer still good?" "Always. Drive back tomorrow. Get some sleep tonight, okay?" "Okay." She hung up, got in the car, turned the key, didn't start the engine. She sat in the dark, staring at La Tanière's cracked window across the street, and thought about a dog who sat on a windowsill every evening watching a door that nobody walked through. The lamination was adequate. He'd said that. Out of everything. The flour explosion, the oven attack, the smoke alarm, the offensive shaping. He'd said the lamination was adequate. From a dog who'd locked a man in a freezer and eaten a woman's financial projections. Adequate was practically a standing ovation. Piper turned off the car. She'd give it one more day. Chapter 3. Piper didn't know why she drove to Marguerite's cottage on Saturday morning. She had a perfectly good escape plan. Jess's cousin's salon, free highlights, a back room with a working outlet, and no sentient plumbing. She drove to the cottage anyway. It sat on a half-acre just outside Sterling Peaks, tucked behind a stone wall and a garden that had clearly been spectacular once and was now holding on with the grim optimism of someone who hadn't accepted the diagnosis. Rosemary grew wild along the path. A wind chime made of old spoons turned slowly above the porch. The front door was painted lavender and slightly crooked. Marguerite opened it before Piper knocked. "I saw you from the window," she said. "You sit in your car for a long time before making decisions. It's called strategic hesitation. It's called stubbornness. Come in, I have tea." The cottage was warm and small, and packed with evidence of a life fully lived. Shelves of cookbooks in 3 languages, framed photographs of a man who looked like he'd been born laughing, a knitted blanket draped over a chair that had the specific dip of a seat someone had occupied every evening for decades. On the mantelpiece, a single photo. A dark-haired man in a flour-dusted apron, grinning, with a very small, very white puppy asleep on his shoulder. Piper looked away before Marguerite noticed her staring. "I want a second chance," she said. Marguerite set a teacup in front of her, blue china, chipped on the handle. "With the kitchen?" "With Mochi. The kitchen. The whole thing." Piper wrapped her hands around the cup. The warmth seeped into her palms. "I know he said no. I know he said no to 7 people before me. But Marguerite, I'm not asking to turn it into a brewery or a yoga studio. I want to bake. That's all. You can't let a dog make this decision." Marguerite sat across from her and folded her hands on the table. The morning light caught the lines in her face. Not old, Piper thought. Tired. The kind of tired that comes from holding something together for too long. "The decision may not be Mochi's to make much longer," Marguerite said. Piper's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "The Pack Council owns the building, not me. Henri had a lifetime tenancy agreement. As long as a Delacroix operated the patisserie, the building stayed. When Henri passed, I tried." She looked at her hands. "I truly tried. Mochi would give me instructions, detailed ones, temperature to the half degree, timing to the second. He'd stand on the counter and direct me like a tiny conductor. And I am 78 years old with arthritis in both hands and no formal training, trying to replicate the work of a master pastry chef under the supervision of a 4-pound perfectionist who once made me redo a glaze 9 times because the luminosity was insufficient." Marguerite sipped her tea. Insufficient luminosity on a lemon tart. Piper pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. The pastries weren't the same, Marguerite continued. They couldn't be, and the wolves who used to come, they could tell. They'd take a bite, and their faces would do this. She made a small, polite expression that conveyed the precise devastation of tasting something that was almost right. And they'd say, "Lovely Marguerite," and never come back. And Mochi? Mochi watched them not come back every Sunday. He'd arrange the tables, set out the napkins, position the pastries in the case exactly how Henri used to, and then he'd sit on the windowsill and wait. Marguerite's voice went quiet. The waiting is the worst part. He won't stop waiting. The spoon wine chime turned outside. Somewhere in the garden, a bird sang something small and pointless and beautiful. "When does the council vote?" Piper asked. "Next Sunday." That's Easter Sunday." "Yes, 1 week. A developer has offered to buy the building. Residential condos. Very profitable for the council." Marguerite's jaw tightened. They've been patient. 3 years patient. But without a working patisserie, the tenancy clause is void, and they have every right to sell. "Does Mochi know?" Marguerite gave her a look. "Mochi knows everything that happens in that building. I don't know how. I stopped asking." She set her cup down. "He's been worse this week, sculpting constantly, rearranging the kitchen. He moved the flour sacks twice yesterday for no reason I could see. He's stressed, terrified, but he'd rather be locked in the walk-in freezer than admit it." Piper stared into her tea. A week. 7 days to prove a crumbling patisserie deserved to exist, with a dog who wouldn't let her touch the ovens and a kitchen that had tried to physically assault her. "The kitchen," she said. "Yesterday when I was baking, it wasn't just old equipment. The oven, the plumbing, the tray that wouldn't go in. It felt like the building didn't want you there." "Yes." Marguerite was quiet for a moment. Henri used to say the kitchen had moods, good days and bad days. He'd talk to it in the morning. "How are we feeling today?" And adjust his plans based on what he sensed. She smiled, but it was thin. "I always thought he was being whimsical. Then I tried to bake in it alone, and the oven burned everything I touched for 2 straight weeks, like it was grieving. Or testing." Their eyes met. "Maybe," Marguerite said. Piper stood. "I'm going back. He'll say no again. Then I'll make him say something else." Mochi was rearranging tables when she walked in. He'd pushed 2 of the 8 tops together near the window, straightened the chairs, placed a single napkin at each seat, folded into precise triangles. The display case had been polished so aggressively, the glass was practically invisible. He froze when the door opened. For one unguarded second, he looked like exactly what he was, a very small dog doing a very big job that was breaking him. Then the mask slammed back. He hopped onto the nearest table and sat on a napkin triangle, daring her to comment. "We need to talk," Piper said. "We have talked. Extensively." The conclusion was none. "I do not revisit editorial decisions." Piper pulled out a chair and sat down across from him, eye level. She didn't reach for anything, didn't move toward the kitchen. Just sat. "I know about next Sunday," she said. His left ear flattened, the only tell. "Marguerite talks too much. She's worried about you." Marguerite worries about everything. She worries about the weather. She worries about her rosemary. Last week she worried about a cloud she thought looked like a sad face. Mochi's voice was clipped, controlled, the way people sound when they're terrified and building walls out of consonants. "I am not a cloud." "No, you're a dog sitting in an empty restaurant putting out napkins for people who aren't coming." The words landed harder than she'd intended. Mochi went still. Not the calculated stillness of a negotiator, the stillness of something that had been hit. Piper softened her voice. "I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because we have 6 days, and you can spend them locking me in a freezer, or you can let me help." "You cannot help. Your shaping is offensive." "My shaping is improving. From catastrophic to merely terrible. This is not the trajectory of a savior. I'm not trying to be a savior. I'm trying to be a baker in a bakery, which is apparently the most controversial ambition in this entire town." Piper leaned forward. "Mochi, you have every recipe in your head. You have the vision. You can design things I couldn't dream of, but you can't—" "Choose your next words with great care, madam," physically reach the oven dial. His eyes narrowed to black slits. I have a system, involving a step stool and a carefully calibrated spatula lever. You need hands, human hands, and I have 2 of them. And they're pretty good at making pastry, and they're here, and nobody else is coming. The clock ticked. Outside, a car drove past. The lavender door cottage was visible through the window, barely, at the end of the road. The council is selling the building, Mochi said. Not a question. Next Sunday, unless the patisserie proves it's still functioning as a pack gathering place. It is functioning. Mochi, I open the door every Sunday. The tables are set. The napkins are folded. It is functioning. His voice cracked on the last word. He covered it immediately with a sniff. The community is simply delayed. Piper's chest ached. She didn't reach for him, didn't try to comfort. He'd bite her hand off. Then let's give them something to come back for, she said. He stared at her, hard, searching for the lie, the angle, the real estate portfolio hidden behind the earnest expression. He'd seen 7 of them. 7 people who wanted the building and not what the building meant. If I agree, he said slowly, and that is an if of considerable magnitude, there will be rules. Fine. My designs, my recipes, my standards. You execute. You do not improvise. You do not substitute margarine for butter. You do not, ever, fold right to left. Left to right, got it. If at any point your work falls below acceptable quality, I reserve the right to terminate the arrangement immediately and without emotional discussion. Define acceptable quality. My definition, non-negotiable. If you have to ask, you've already failed. That's insane. Those are my terms. Piper stuck out her hand. Deal. Mochi looked at her hand, looked at her face, looked at her hand again. He extended one paw, placed it on her index finger with the gravity of a head of state signing a treaty. We begin now, he said. And Piper? Yeah? If you touch the clay animals, the deal is off, and I will reprogram your GPS to somewhere significantly worse than a goat farm. Noted! They worked through the night. Mochi directed from the Marble Island, a 4-pound general commanding his single-soldier army. He was exacting. He was relentless. He corrected her grip on the rolling pin. You are choking it. It is not a tennis racket. Her oven timing, 3 seconds too long and you have committed crémation, not caramelization. And her posture, stand straight. Pastry can sense fear and poor spinal alignment. Piper listened, adjusted, listened again. And somewhere around midnight, the kitchen exhaled. The oven stopped fighting her. The temperature held steady. Not perfect, but honest, like a truce between old enemies. The water pressure settled. The walk-in door opened on the first pull. Even the Marble Island seemed to warm under her hands, the crack down its center glowing faintly in the overhead light, as if something deep in the stone was deciding, slowly, to trust. Mochi noticed. She saw his ears lift, a fraction, then more. His directions came faster, more confident. He stopped correcting and started creating, describing designs she couldn't see yet, his voice shifting between English and French mid-sentence when the vision outpaced the translation. The croissant must have 17 visible layers when you break it open. Not 16, not 18, 17. Henri said 17 was the number where the butter sings. You can hear it if you listen. A tiny crackle like... He paused, blinked. Like the sound a kitchen makes when it decides you're allowed to stay. Piper broke open a croissant, counted the layers. 17. Neither of them said anything about it. By 2 a.m., the kitchen was alive. Trays of croissants cooling on racks, their tops shattering gold. Fruit tarts with glazes that caught the light like stained glass. A chocolate mousse so dark and smooth it looked like a lake at midnight. Eclairs lined up in formation, each one identical, each one gleaming. And on the Marble Island, Mochi's clay models, an Easter garden, tiny rabbits and foxes and hedgehogs, each one sculpted with 11 hours of precision, waiting to be translated into chocolate and fondant. He hadn't asked her to make them yet. He'd set them where she could see them. An offering, or a test. With Mochi, they were the same thing. By 4 a.m., the display case was full. For the first time in 3 years, La Tanière's glass front glowed with rows of perfect golden, impossibly beautiful French pastry. Mochi stood on the counter and surveyed the case. His reflection stared back at him from the polished glass, a tiny white figure flanked by croissants. "The eclairs are a quarter centimeter too tall," he said. "They're perfect, and you know it. Perfection is an asymptote, not an achievement." But his tail moved. Once. A single involuntary wag that he suppressed immediately. "Was that a wag?" Piper asked. "It was a spasm. I have a medical condition. It is not relevant." "You wagged." "I did not wag. I am a professional." "Professionals do not wag at adequate pastry." He straightened his posture. "Now, the tables." They set them together, chairs straightened, napkins folded into Mochi's precise triangles. Piper found a box of small glass vases in the back, Henri's probably, and filled them with sprigs of rosemary from the overgrown herb garden behind the building. Mochi positioned each vase with military precision, adjusting angles by fractions of degrees. When they finished, the dining room looked like it had taken a breath and remembered what it used to be. The photographs on the wall watched over 8 set tables, warm light pooling on clean surfaces, the display case glowing like a hearth. Mochi hopped onto the windowsill, his usual spot. But this time, instead of facing the empty street with resignation, he was vibrating. A low, constant tremor running through his entire small body. "Hey," Piper said. "You okay?" "I am fine." The tremor intensified. "I'm completely in control of all physical and emotional responses." "You're shaking." "I am vibrating at an elevated frequency. It is a sign of operational readiness, very common in high-performance professionals." The first gray light of Sunday crept through the cracked window. Morning. The street outside was empty and quiet and cold. "It's time," Piper said. Mochi jumped down from the sill, trotted to the front door, sat in front of it, straight-backed, ears up. Piper unlocked the door and pulled it open. Cool morning air rolled in, carrying the smell of pine and distant snow and the first tentative warmth of a spring that hadn't quite committed. The street stretched out in both directions. The kombucha bar was dark. The crystal shop was dark. The sidewalks were empty. Mochi positioned himself just inside the open doorway, a sentry at the gate. Piper stood behind the counter with her hands clasped together and her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. They waited. The clock ticked past 7. Past 7:30, the croissants cooled, the tarts settled. The display case glowed at the empty street like a lantern in a window, calling ships that might never come home. 8 o'clock, nothing. 8:30. A jogger passed without looking in. 9. The kombucha bar's owner arrived, unlocked his door, glanced over, and gave Piper a surprised wave. He didn't come in. 9:30. 10. The croissants were no longer warm. The eclair had begun to settle. Even the chocolate mousse, which had been perfect at 4 a.m., had developed a thin skin that dulled its midnight surface. Mochi hadn't moved from the doorway. His ears had dropped, slowly by degrees, like a flag being lowered. His body had stopped vibrating. He sat perfectly still, perfectly straight, a 4-pound statue staring at an empty sidewalk. Piper couldn't watch anymore. She walked to the doorway and sat on the floor next to him, close enough that her arm almost touched his fur, but not quite. She'd learned that much. They sat together in the open door of La Tanière and watched the beautiful spring morning pass them by, carrying not a single soul to the tables Henri Delacroix had once filled every Sunday of his life. Mochi's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "I told you," he said. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "This is why I said non." He didn't say you failed or it wasn't good enough or the shaping was still offensive. He just said, "I told you." Like a dog who'd been right about everything, every Sunday for 3 years, and would have given anything to be wrong. Piper opened her mouth, closed it. What could she possibly say to a 4-pound creature who'd kept a dead man's kitchen running for 1,000 days, waiting for a community that had forgotten how to walk through an open door? "Mochi!" He stood, walked to the windowsill, jumped up, turned his back to the street, faced the wall. Piper sat alone in the doorway of a bakery full of perfect, uneaten pastries and stared at the empty road until her eyes burned. Chapter 4. They almost didn't bake. Saturday morning, Piper found Mochi in the dark kitchen, sitting on the marble island next to his clay animals. He wasn't sculpting. He wasn't rearranging. He was just sitting, and that was worse than any French tirade he'd ever launched. She set a cup of coffee on the counter. Not gas station. She'd driven 40 minutes to a roaster in Carbondale that Marguerite had mentioned once, bought the single origin Arabica with the hand-roasted label, and carried it back in a ceramic travel mug she'd found at a thrift store for $2. Mochi glanced at the mug, sniffed. His left ear lifted a quarter inch. He said nothing. Piper tied on the apron, the one she'd claimed as hers during the all-night bake, the one with the faded embroidery that read La Tanière in thread, that had once been gold. She walked to the oven and turned it on. "What are you doing?" Mochi asked. "Preheating." "For what purpose?" "For baking." Piper pulled the flour from the shelf, butter from the walk-in, eggs from the basket Marguerite had left on the back step. "We're making croissants." "There is no point." "There's always a point. The point is croissants." "Nobody came, Piper." His voice was flat, scraped clean of performance and pretense, just a small dog stating a fact that had broken him. "I have been opening that door for 3 years. Nobody comes." Piper set the butter on the marble, looked at him. "Then we'll bake for nobody, and the croissants will be perfect anyway, because that's what you do." She held his gaze. "That's what Henri did, right? He didn't bake because people showed up. People showed up because he baked." Mochi's jaw tightened. The mention of Henri's name did something visible. A flinch, fast, buried under 4 pounds of composure. "You don't know anything about Henri," he said. "I know he found a starving puppy in a dumpster in Lyon who was guarding macarons he wouldn't even eat." Piper's voice was quiet. "And I know that puppy grew up to guard this kitchen the exact same way. Because somebody taught him that the food matters even when nobody's watching." Mochi stared at her. "Who told you that?" he whispered. "Marguerite." He looked away. His paw found the clay rabbit, the one he'd been sculpting since the day Piper walked in, and held it. The silence stretched. Then he set the rabbit down, straightened his shoulders, drew one breath. "The butter needs to be at 4 degrees Celsius, he said. "Not 3, not 5, 4. And if you fold right to left, I will end this partnership and your career in the same stroke. Left to right, always. Your coffee is acceptable." "Thank you." That was not a compliment. It was a reclassification from war crime to tolerable. "Begin." They baked through Saturday, not frantically like the all-night session, deliberately. Mochi directed with the focus of a master restoring a cathedral. Every layer, every fold, every degree of temperature called with a precision that left no room for doubt. Piper executed, and this time her hands knew the kitchen. The oven held steady. The marble warmed under her palms. The walk-in opened like it had been waiting for her. Mochi's Easter garden came to life. He'd been designing it in clay for weeks. Piper understood that now. Every tiny animal on the windowsill was a blueprint. A chocolate rabbit with individual whiskers, a fondant fox curled around sugar glass mushrooms, a hedgehog family waddling across a meadow of pistachio moss, a sparrow, wings spread, suspended on a wire so thin it looked like it was actually flying. Mochi described each piece with the intensity of a man dictating his will. Piper built them one by one, translating clay into chocolate with hands that were steadier than they'd been all week. When she finished the sparrow, Mochi examined it for 37 seconds. She counted and said, "The wingspan is accurate." Coming from him, it felt like a standing ovation at the Met. By midnight, the display case blazed. Croissants with 17 layers, tarts that caught light like jewels, eclairs in perfect formation, and in the center, behind the glass, Mochi's Easter garden, a miniature world of chocolate and sugar and fondant so beautiful it looked like something that had grown there overnight, conjured by a pastry chef's ghost and a very small dog who refused to let the magic die. Mochi positioned the last piece, a tiny chocolate egg nestled in the fondant grass, and stepped back. "It's beautiful," Piper said. "It is adequate." His tail trembled. He locked it down. We open at 7. Mochi? What? If nobody comes tomorrow, then we will bake again the next Sunday. He said it like a vow, like a dog who had finally stopped waiting for rescue and started building the rescue himself. And the Sunday after that, and the one after that, until somebody walks through that door or I physically run out of butter, whichever comes first. That might be the most stubborn thing anyone's ever said to me. I learned from the best. He looked at the photo on the wall. Henri, flower in his hair, laughing. Go sleep. You have circles under your eyes that could qualify as geological formations. You're not sleeping? Someone has to guard the eclairs. He hopped onto the windowsill. They are too beautiful to be left unsupervised. Piper slept on the floor of the dining room, wrapped in her coat, head on her duffel bag, 4 feet from a display case that glowed like a promise somebody was about to keep. Easter Sunday. 7 a.m. Piper unlocked the front door. Mochi took his position just inside, ears up, posture perfect. The street was empty. The morning air smelled like pine and cold earth, and the first real warmth of spring. Piper stood behind the counter, hands clasped, heart hammering. Here we go again. 7:15. Nothing. 7:30. A sparrow landed on the windowsill outside and pecked at nothing. Mochi regarded it with professional interest. 7:45. Piper's stomach turned. She looked at Mochi. He sat motionless, a soldier at his post. She couldn't tell if he was breathing. At 7:52 a.m., the door opened. The college kid from the library walked in. Beanie, backpack, the same hungry, searching look. He stopped 2 steps inside and stared at the display case. "Holy crap," he said. "Language," Mochi murmured. "Can I—" The kid pointed at a croissant. "How much?" $3.50, Piper said, and her voice only broke a little. He bought 2, sat at the window table, took a bite. His eyes closed. He chewed with the slow, reverent attention of someone encountering a religious experience in pastry form. "This is the best thing I've ever eaten," he said. "Correct," Mochi said. The door opened again. The man from the library. Fleece vest. Water bottle. He walked in with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd known this place once and recognized it in his bones. "Well," he said, looking around. "There she is." He ordered a coffee and a fruit tart and sat in the corner booth, the one with initials carved into the wood. He ran his thumb over the carvings while he ate and didn't say anything for a long time. Then the jogger from last Sunday pushed through the door, still in running gear, breathing hard. "I saw the sign last week. Couldn't stop. But I told my wife, and she told her book club, and—" She looked over her shoulder. Behind her, 3 more women were crossing the street. "They're right behind me." They were, and behind them, an older couple Piper had never seen, and a man carrying a toddler on his shoulders, and 2 teenagers who looked like they'd been dragged by a parent and were now staring at the chocolate garden with expressions of genuine awe. "Did you?" Piper looked at the college kid. "Did you tell people?" He shrugged, mid-croissant. "I put it on the town Facebook group. That old bakery on Main has the best croissant I've ever had. Got like 200 shares." He took another bite. "You gave me your lunch. Figured I owed you." The fleece vest man raised his coffee cup. "I called a few people. The Sunday crowd from the old days. Told them Henri's place was open. By 8:30, every table was full. By 9, people were standing. The line reached the door. The kombucha bar owner came in and ordered 6 croissants for his staff. Madame Opal from the crystal shop bought a chocolate eclair, claimed it had transformative aura energy, and tried to read Mochi's palm. Mochi declined with a dignity that suggested he'd been declining psychic readings his entire life. "Your energy is very guarded," Madame Opal told him. "My energy is private," Mochi corrected, "as is my palm, and my aura. Please remove your hand from my general vicinity." Piper worked the counter, the oven, and the register simultaneously, moving with a speed and grace she didn't know she had. Every croissant that left the case was replaced by a fresh one from the back. Every tart, every eclair, they kept coming. Because Mochi had prepped enough for an army, because Mochi always prepped enough, because for 3 years he'd been baking for a full house that never arrived, and now the full house was here and the food was ready. She'd just boxed up a dozen croissants for the man with the toddler when the front door opened one more time. A woman stepped inside, mid-50s, quiet, careful. She stood just past the threshold with the tentative posture of someone entering a church they'd been away from for too long. Her eyes swept the room, the tables, the photographs, the height chart, the display case. She walked to the counter. Her gaze landed on the croissants. "May I?" she asked. Piper handed her one. The woman broke it open, counted the layers. Piper saw her lips move, counting, and brought it to her nose, inhaled. Something in her face shifted, a fracture line running through careful composure. She took a bite, chewed, swallowed. Her eyes went gold. Just for a second. A flash, like sunlight catching a coin. Wolf eyes, then gone, blinked back to brown, but Piper had seen it. Marguerite, standing by the kitchen door with a dish towel pressed to her mouth, had seen it too. "This is Henri's recipe," the woman said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "The 17 layers, the butter ratio. Who made this?" Piper looked at Mochi. Mochi was standing on the display case. He had abandoned all pretense of professional detachment. His entire body was oriented toward this woman, ears forward, eyes bright, trembling with something that was definitely not a medical condition. "Mochi?" the woman whispered. He sat down on the glass, drew himself up, composed his face into an expression of severe formality that was completely, devastatingly undermined by the fact that his tail was wagging so hard his entire back half was moving. "You are late," he told her, "by approximately 157 Sundays." The woman laughed. It came out broken and wet and real. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry." "Your usual table is available," Mochi said, and his voice cracked unusual. It has always been available. She sat in the booth by the window, the one Mochi had set first, every single week for 3 years, the one with the best view of the door. Within 20 minutes, 2 more wolves walked in. Then a family with 3 children whose eyes all flashed gold when they bit into Mochi's chocolate eggs. Then an elderly couple who went straight to the height chart, found their grandchildren's names scratched into the wood, and stood there holding each other without speaking. Marguerite was crying. She wasn't hiding it. She stood in the kitchen doorway with flour on her apron and tears running openly down her lined face, watching her son's tables fill with wolves who had finally come home. At 10:15, a silver-haired man in a well-cut coat walked through the door. The room went slightly quieter. Piper saw Marguerite straighten, saw Mochi's ears flatten, saw the wolves at the nearest tables sit up with the careful attention of people recognizing authority. "That's Councilman Harker," Marguerite murmured. The councilman surveyed the room, the full tables, the line at the counter, the wolves and the humans eating side by side, the display case glowing, the Easter garden, magnificent. A 4-pound dog standing in the center of it all, like a general who'd held the position long after the army retreated and lived to see the reinforcements arrive. Councilman Harker picked up a croissant, bit into it, chewed, nodded once. He looked at Marguerite. "I'll inform the council the tenancy clause is satisfied. The sale is off." Marguerite's knees buckled. Piper caught her elbow. Mochi didn't move from his post, but a sound came out of him. Small, involuntary, the kind of sound a dog makes when the thing he's been guarding is finally, irrevocably safe. "The eclairs," Mochi said, because he had to say something and couldn't say what he actually felt, "are not included in the tenancy review. They are a separate matter entirely, and I will not have them politicized." "Nobody's politicizing your eclairs," Piper said. "The croissant lobby is powerful, and I will not be caught off guard." "Mochi." "What?" "We did it." He looked at her. She looked at him. Around them, the patisserie hummed with voices and laughter, and the clink of cups, and the tearing of warm bread, and the sound, unmistakable, irreplaceable, of a room full of people who had found their way back to a table that had been set for them every Sunday for 3 years by someone who never stopped believing they'd come. "We did nothing," Mochi said. "I designed. You executed. The division of labor is clear, and I will not have it misrepresented. Right, sorry. You are forgiven. He paused. Your croissant lamination has improved to acceptable. I am prepared to make this assessment official. Acceptable? Do not push your luck. Piper grinned. Mochi did not grin because he was a professional, but his tail committed one full, undeniable, historically unprecedented wag before he regained control. That was a wag, Piper said. Spasm. Full wag. Spasm. Medically documented, not open for discussion. He straightened on the display case. Now, there are customers waiting. Your station is the register. Mine is quality control. If I see a single croissant leave this building without 17 layers, I will file a formal complaint with who? There's no pastry police, Mochi. There should be, he said with absolute conviction. And when there is, I intend to be commissioner. The library man stayed until closing. When the crowds thinned, Piper brought him to the kitchen. This is Mochi, she said. He's the reason the food is what it is. Every recipe, every design, every detail. Henri taught him everything. The man crouched down. Mochi assessed him from the marble island. You told people, Mochi said, about the patisserie. I made a few calls. The man shrugged. Told them Henri's place was serving again. That was enough. Mochi considered this. Your name? Walter. Walter, you are welcome on Sundays. It was the highest honor Mochi could bestow, and he delivered it with the ceremonial weight of a knighthood. Your usual table will be the second booth. Window side. I will reserve it. I'd like that. The croissants are served at 7. If you arrive after 7:15, I cannot guarantee optimal temperature. I refuse to be held responsible for lukewarm lamination. 7 sharp. Acceptable. They shook on it. Walter's full hand, Mochi's single paw. Jess arrived at noon, because of course she did. She'd driven 4 hours after Piper hadn't answered her phone all morning, expecting to find her friend living in a car behind a crumbling building. Instead, she walked into a packed patisserie, saw Piper running the register with flour in her hair and a line out the door, and burst into tears in front of the crystal shop. You absolute lunatic, Jess said, hugging her so hard the register rattled. You magnificent, stupid, brilliant lunatic. I had help. Piper nodded toward the display case, where Mochi was supervising a customer's pastry selection with the intensity of an air traffic controller. No, with the fruit tart, not that one. The one at 2 o'clock, slightly to the left. That one has optimal glaze distribution. The other is 0.3 millimeters uneven, and I will not have it representing this establishment. Jess stared. Is that dog giving quality control instructions? In 2 languages, Piper said. Welcome to La Tanière. Late afternoon. The last customer had gone. The tables were scattered with crumbs and abandoned napkins and the warm debris of a room that had been well and truly used. The display case was empty. Not abandoned empty, not waiting empty. Eaten empty. Every last crumb empty. Mochi sat on the marble island in the golden late-day light. His clay animals stood behind him in their row. The kitchen smelled like butter and sugar and possibility. Marguerite had gone home. Jess was asleep on 2 pushed-together dining chairs, snoring quietly, a half-eaten eclair still in her hand. Piper leaned against the counter and looked at her business partner. So, she said, partners, for real this time. I require terms in writing, Mochi said. My title is Executive Creative Director, non-negotiable. Done. Proper French butter, imported. If I see margarine in this kitchen, I will burn the building down myself and save the developer the trouble. Noted. And Piper. Yeah? He was quiet for a moment. The afternoon light caught his fur and turned it gold. Henri would have liked you, he said. Your lamination is still 3% off his standard. Your shaping needs considerable work. And your coffee palette is, frankly, an ongoing concern. He hopped off the island, trotted to the front door, looked back at her. But he would have liked you, he said. Very much. Piper's throat closed. She nodded because speaking wasn't an option. Mochi turned back to the door. The closed sign hung in the window, but the glass still held the ghost of warm light from the day's baking. Same time tomorrow? He asked. There is a Monday brioche recipe we have not attempted. It requires 6 hours of proving and absolute silence during the first rise. I will not tolerate conversation, humming, or the sound of your phone buzzing. Clear? Crystal. Then I will see you at 4 a.m. He paused at the door. Do not be late, the dough can tell. He disappeared into the back room where he slept, a small bed Marguerite had set up behind the pantry, next to a shelf of Henri's old recipe notebooks and a framed photograph of a man with flour in his hair and a puppy on his shoulder. Piper stood alone in the kitchen. She looked at the marble island, the clay animals, the copper pots catching the last light. She pulled out her phone. "Jess," she said, when her friend picked up from 6 feet away, half asleep and confused. "I'm right here. Why are you calling me?" "I'm right here. Cancel your cousin's salon." Jess opened one eye, looked at the kitchen, the empty display case, the flour on every surface, the small warm room that smelled like home. "Already did," Jess said. 3 hours ago. She closed her eye. "Now let me sleep. Your dog is exhausting." "He's not my dog. He's absolutely your dog." From the back room, very faintly, "I am no one's dog. I am an independent creative professional in a collaborative partnership. The distinction is critical, and I will not have it." "Go to sleep, Mochi," Piper said. Silence. Then, barely audible, "Bonne nuit. Good night." 6 blocks away, a man in a charcoal overcoat walked down Main Street with a phone pressed to his ear and the unhurried stride of someone who owned considerably more than he could see. "You're doing it again," his brother said. "Doing what?" Ashton Castlemaine asked. "That thing where you go quiet and I can hear you looking at buildings. You're standing on a sidewalk right now evaluating property, aren't you?" "Don't lie to me. I can hear the evaluating. I'm taking a walk." "You don't take walks. You take acquisitions. The last time you took a walk, we ended up owning a ski resort in Verbier, and Dad didn't speak to you for a month." His brother's voice carried the exasperated affection of someone who had spent a lifetime being the sensible Castlemaine. "Ashton, the Pack Council's barely functional, the infrastructure's a decade behind, and the last 3 investment proposals from this region returned negative. Dad's board is already questioning the Ridgeline deal. If you pour capital into another mountain town with nothing going for it, it has something going for it." "What? The kombucha bar? The psychic who talks to dead pets?" "There's a patisserie." "A patisserie." A pause. "Is it operational?" "It appears to be." "You said appears. That's not a yes. That's a real estate brochure word. Ashton, a town's nothing without a decent commercial anchor, and a crumbling pastry shop with a for sale sign is not. The sign's been turned down." "What?" "The for sale sign. Someone turned it face down on the windowsill." Ashton stopped walking. 6 blocks ahead, a warm glow pulsed from a cracked window. A crumbling Victorian storefront, gold lettering mostly gone, wedged between the kombucha bar and the crystal shop. The awning sagged. The front step was crooked. And behind the glass, a figure. A woman, moving through the dim interior. She paused at the display case, reached up to wipe the glass with her sleeve, and the fading light caught her profile for a single moment. Flower in her hair. Something fierce in the set of her shoulders. The kind of person who cleaned display cases at closing time instead of leaving them for morning. Something shifted in Ashton's chest. Low, unfamiliar, not a thought, a pull. His wolf, quiet for months, stirred once and settled, like an animal raising its head at a distant sound it couldn't yet name. He blinked. The woman had moved deeper into the shop, out of sight. "Ashton?" His brother's voice sharpened. "You still there?" "I'm here." "You went quiet again. That's the evaluating silence. I know the evaluating silence. I grew up with the evaluating silence." A sigh. "Look, I love you, but can you please focus on the actual priority? Mum's been on my case every single day. Every single day." "When is Ashton going to find his mate? When is Ashton going to settle down? His father and I were bonded by 26, and your brother is out there buying mountains. I'm 31, which, according to Mum, makes you practically a cautionary tale." His brother's voice softened. "She's not wrong, though. Forget the ROI for 5 minutes. When's the last time your wolf even reacted to anyone?" Ashton stared at the patisserie window. The warm glow, the empty display case gleaming like it had been polished with hope. The pull in his chest hadn't faded. If anything, it had settled deeper, not louder, but more certain. Like a compass needle finding north and locking there. "I'll call you tomorrow," Ashton said. "That means you're buying something. You always say, 'I'll call you tomorrow,' right before you buy something." "Ashton, Ashton, do not buy a mountain town because it has a patisserie. Good night, Marcus." A crumbling patisserie with a turned down for sale sign, which, by the way, is not the selling point you seem to think it. Ashton hung up. He stood on the cold sidewalk of a town his brother had told him to forget. The evening air smelled like pine and sugar, and the last breath of winter losing its grip on something. Down the block, the patisserie's light went out, but the pull in his chest stayed, and his wolf, for the first time in longer than Ashton could remember, was wide awake.
And that's 1,000 Days to Sweet Home, written by D.N. Leo, narrated by Jessica Lee. I'm fine. I'm completely fine. I just need a moment, and possibly a croissant. And possibly to sit in a corner and think about a 4-pound dog who opened a door every Sunday for 3 years because he believed someone would walk through it. I'm fine. So, Piper has a kitchen. Mochi has a partner. La Tanière has a heartbeat again. And somewhere on the edge of town, a man in a very expensive coat is looking at that patisserie window, and his wolf is doing something it hasn't done in a very long time. Want to know what happens when he walks through that door? Well, I won't spoil your story, but I can tell you this. The cake disaster alone is worth it. There is a skateboard. There is a wedding dress. And of course, Mochi does something at a gala to save that very special day. If you thought he was magnificent in this story, you have no idea what's coming. The full romance, The Alpha's Sweet Disaster, is waiting for you at happynovels.com, link in the description. This story is part of the Happy Hour program, the free collection within Happy Novels. You can find the entire collection at happynovels.com. The silver tier is free, so come join the pack. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a thumbs up. And share it with someone who needs a very small, very French, very stubborn reason to believe that the best things in life are worth waiting for. I'm Mabel. Thank you for spending this time with me. The voice lessons continue. My teacher has started bringing wine to our sessions. I choose to see that as progress. Until next time, stay cozy and stay in love.